The college counselor who said I'd never be anything just applied to my company. Senior year, I was desperate to get into engineering school. My grades were solid, but my family couldn't afford test prep like other kids. Mrs. Davidson ran our college counseling and made it clear students like me weren't her priority. She spent time crafting perfect applications for wealthy kids while treating everyone else like a burden. When I scheduled my mandatory counseling meeting, she barely looked up from her computer. Community college, maybe trade school, she said without reviewing my transcript. Kids from your background need to be realistic about their options. I tried explaining my passion for engineering, my perfect math scores, my robotics leadership. She cut me off. Listen, I've been doing this for 20 years. Engineering requires connections you don't have. You'd just be setting yourself up for failure. When I asked about scholarship applications, she handed me a generic pamphlet. Fill these out if you want, but don't get your hopes up. Meanwhile, I watched her spend hours helping Brandon Walsh, whose dad owned half the town. Brandon had a 2.8 GPA and couldn't explain what engineering was. I applied to MIT anyway, writing my own essays during lunch breaks and submitting everything without her help. 3 months later, I got my acceptance letter with a full scholarship. I brought it to Miss Dizzen's office, thinking she'd be excited to share in a student's success. She studied the letter like it was fake. Well, she said finally, getting in is one thing, staying in is another. Don't come crying to me when you wash out first semester. Flash forward 8 years. I graduated summa cum laude, got my master's from Stanford, and now I'm CTO at a tech startup worth $50 million. Last week, my assistant handed me a stack of resumes for our new director of operations position. The name on the top application made me do a double take. Mrs. Davidson. Her resume was impressive, 25 years in education, multiple certifications, program management experience, but her cover letter caught my attention. I'm passionate about helping people reach their potential and have spent my career guiding young minds towards success. I almost laughed out loud. Instead of tossing her application, I decided to give her a fair interview. I wanted to see if she'd changed, if maybe she'd learned something about judging people's potential. The day of her interview, I waited in the conference room as my HR director brought her in. Mrs. Davidson looked exactly the same, perfectly styled hair, expensive suit, that same condescending smile. She didn't recognize me. For 30 minutes, I listened to her talk about her philosophy of nurturing talent and her ability to identify high-potential individuals. I pride myself on seeing the best in people, she said confidently. Throughout my career, I've helped countless students achieve dreams they never thought possible. When she finished her pitch, I leaned back in my chair. That's interesting, I said. Tell me about a time when you might have underestimated someone's potential. She thought for a moment. Honestly, that rarely happens. I've developed a pretty good eye for identifying who has what it takes to succeed. Never been wrong? Not about anything significant, she said with that familiar smugness. I opened my laptop and pulled up my old high school transcript, the same one she'd dismissed 8 years ago. What would you think about this student's chances of success in engineering? She studied the screen, not realizing whose grades she was reviewing. Decent academics, but engineering? She shook her head. This student lacks the background and resources necessary for that field. I'd recommend something more practical. I closed the laptop and looked directly at her. Mrs. Davidson, I'm that student. The color drained from her face as recognition finally dawned. You told me I'd never amount to anything, that I should stick to community college, that engineering required connections and resources I didn't have. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. I don't recall. Circumstances change. You're right, I said, standing up. Circumstances do change. 8 years ago, you had the power to crush dreams. Today, I have the power to recognize talent. I walked to the door and held it open. Thank you for coming in, Mrs. Davidson. We'll be in touch. We weren't. 2 days later, I sent her a polite rejection email. While your experience is impressive, we've decided to move forward with candidates who better align with our company culture of believing in people's potential. Sometimes the best revenge is just being really good at proving people wrong.